Hello. Hi, Stephanie. Hi, Lyd. How y'all doing? Turn this down just a smidge. All the tech stuff's working great so far, except for the music is glitching out. So we'll see how that goes. Howdy, folks. Hope everybody's week is going as well as possible. It is, the vibes continue to be what they are at the moment. And by vibes, I also largely mean the greater scope of America. So, I hope that I can be a little moment of peace for everybody here tonight. Peace and protection. Yeah, we're talking protection stuff. I put in the Discord, as I think everybody who's here currently would have seen. What I normally use for protection is just the Earth, the astrological symbol for Earth, right? Circle with a equal armed cross in the middle. Vibes are vibing, correct. But yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit more about that symbol, a little bit more about other forms of protection and how I do stuff, because I also mentioned in the Discord, right, that I use my boy, okay, cat tax, because he wants attention. So I also mentioned I tend to do layers on my protections, right? There's all kinds of stuff going at all times. And I'll be so honest, I think I have probably set up more protections than I remember. There is definitely some stuff that you can set up sort of in the broader astral space and set it and forget it. There are, I forget who I heard talking about this at one point, but there's already kind of a couple of levels to your protection stuff. It does seem like most of the people are on YouTube at the moment, Lyd, if you want to hop over there. But yeah, it seems like that's right. When you're dealing with witchy shit and spirit shit, there's already a couple of different approaches, and they all do similar results with varying practices, right? And so the same kind of thing happens when you're talking protection magic. Or just broader spiritual protection. Your overall just energetic aura, your all that stuff. Your general energy is where your normal shield goes, right? Everybody talks about our grounding, clearing, shielding, etc. Blah blah blah. Your personal energy gets hit with a shield, right? So that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's layer one. You may not always have a shield going, but even if you don't always have a shield going, you do have a protector guide, right? So your protector guide will do some of that work for you. They're not necessarily your actual, they're not necessarily your 100% of the time bodyguard, but if anything fishy's happening, they're paying enough attention that they'll catch on and they'll come help, right? So that's already kind of 2 layers. Maybe we'll call it 1.5. because both of those things aren't necessarily going at all times. But so as far as protections on your space, your broader space, the most popular ones that I've seen, which I do totally get and agree with, are definitely going to be those making a protection sigil or using an existing protection sigil and putting it in the 4 corners of a room or the 4 corners of your home or whatever. I would, broadly speaking, you could maybe do 4 corners of your home on one level, and then wherever you tend to do your magic specifically, whatever specific room that's in, I would maybe do a second level on that. That's kind of where the more stuff that you're fussing around with, and it's one of those, that saying of don't pull up what you can't pull down, that thing. If you were to do that, the space where you would be doing that in is probably wherever you're normally doing your magic, right? So If you're doing a broader house protection, I would say still on the specific room that you're doing your magic in, put extra protections on that. I mean, if you want, put extra protections on everything. But just going sort of from the inside out of like your personal energy shield, right? Your like sort of general energy, you have a guardian of some sort, guardian guide or whatever. Then the like actual room that you're in, that you're doing most of your stuff in, that's your next step out, and then you have your broader home, right? So that's kind of what I mean when I'm saying layers of protection. Is each of those has some level of like realistically what you have to do, what you would want to do if you're using this as your general model. Hi, Aaron. Is you want to have your like. I have usually some level of low level shield. I just said you may not always have a shield going. You don't always have to have a super intensive shield going, but I think it's good to have at least some level of just push, some level of zhuzh, right? And I think honestly, just being like spiritually active will put that on a little bit because you're used to putting up a shield when you're doing stuff. And if you don't already have a shield up and you start to get a weird vibe, it's very easy to just have a shield pop in or pop up or pop on or however you want to think about it, right? And I've talked about types of shields before. I might want to revisit that a little bit later, but I think everybody who's here has heard my ramblings on shields at least once. Not that there's not more to talk about, because there is probably, but I don't remember what I said last time, so I would inevitably be repeating some stuff. Regardless, I am being thoroughly distracted by this cat because he doesn't know where he wants to sit. Fine, that works. So when I'm talking about the general layers of protection, I have my broadest protection, my like big sort of house protection, as like pure energy. Like that's not sigil based. That's just I'm using fire because that is an element that works really well for most things. Let's be real. We've talked about previously how it's sort of like classically people will use fire with this like blue fire if they're doing like a lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, right? Is like that's kind of what people default to, at least from what I've read and seen people do and heard people talk of. So that's my I'm sorry, I'm trying to soundtrack and I'm doing pretty good, but this cat just sit in one spot, my little man, please. Thank you. Okay. So I use fire as my broad strokes energy protection on just like the entire space. And even there, I will kind of have multi-layered stuff going on. Realistically, just two. I will have exactly the thing I was just saying of I will have the broad strokes house protection, and then I will have the more specific magical ritual space protection, right? And that goes over, ironically for me, because I do a lot of my magic in here and a lot of my meditations out in the other room, I'm kind of just double layering the entire thing. But regardless, so when I'm doing it, it is black fire because that's what works for me. I would actually like to set up maybe a different shield for the exterior of the house now that I'm like really getting into the nitty gritty. I've talked before when you're setting up a big protection and when you're setting up a shield, it's the same general premise, right? It's just one, you are intentionally putting out more on yourself, and one, you want to be able to run kind of ambiently. So the same way that I talk about tying in energy to sigils, I like to tie in energies to my protections as much as possible. So things like a big black wall of fire, basically, a literal firewall, right? that you can kind of just tap into the energy of fire and like tie that in, right? Or as well, my higher self has a sort of role in maintaining that because he's got enough spare energy. We'll talk more at some point, maybe today, about. I know I've also touched on this as well. How your higher self can be split a little bit in different ways. But yeah, broad strokes before getting too deep into that. Different layers of the self that have different levels of energy, like maintenance and output, can kind of help with these things. So I have a higher self part of me that is able to ambiently kind of feed my protections. Hello, Amber. Hello, hello. So, both my broad strokes home protection and my more specific sort of ritual and magical spaces protections are that same type of energy, in that same type of like black fire energy in different densities. To be completely honest, I didn't even realize they were different densities. I knew I made them differently, but I didn't know what was different about them until right now. And so I was saying I might want to switch my outer protection just to have a little bit more variation. I could always just put another layer on. Like, that's the thing about protective energies as a whole, and why I'm like sort of advocating for layering them. You don't necessarily even have to take your old ones down. You probably should refresh them every once in a while, and I will be 100% legit and say I don't refresh mine that often. But again, there's some level of ambient feeding that it gets from this sort of. This wasn't even like a negotiation, but it is a thing that my higher self has agreed to do. So I might even, we'll see if this causes any tech problems. We've been so good on the tech problems today. I don't want to jinx it, but I see the question lit. I'm gonna do a little example of this energy first, and just like I've already told you guys what it looks like, but just see sort of what you can feel based off of me just making the little small wall. So it's like grounding and right. So that's like a really little small window of this like protective fire energy that I have going around pretty much my entire house, and also in a second layer. So whatever, I'm very interested to see what you guys think of the vibe you got off of that. And again, that was even in a slightly different sort of intensity, density, whatever. All of the energy work stuff you can get into such subtle layers on, and you don't really need to consciously do that. It'll kind of just happen. Excuse me. It's part of that, like having once you have your intent of like, this is a protection for the entire house, this is a protection for this specific space, you kind of subconsciously know how much that'll take, / like your guides might help or like feed in or whatever. But yeah, so as much as you can, tying it into an energy source, and then you don't have to re-up it as often. So yeah, like I said, I do re-up mine. I do. It's like once every like maybe like 8 months, when it should probably be more like once every 3 or 4, just for extra safety. But also, the thing about spiritual protections too, you do want to be protected, you want to have, right? But also, generally speaking, there's probably not the equivalent of someone trying to like hack into your shit, right? Like the levels of protection that like your confidential email server has to have versus your general energy body are completely different types of stuff, and the way that if anybody really wanted to get in, that they would approach it would be completely different, right? So having varied types of protection that are all pretty simple is pretty much enough to keep anybody out, unless they're just like really determined, which it's like, why? Like, if anybody's slinging shit at you, which probably isn't also not happening unless you really are out there making enemies, which, hey, fair enough, I don't know what you do, but generally if someone's slinging something at you, one, maybe two, if it's really intense, layers will bounce it right off or return to sender is a lovely magical application when you need it. I don't think I've ever had to do one, but it's a good one. So if you're ever worried, you can always just do like a return to sender type spell. But generally speaking, I don't think I've had anything come in ever that wasn't like, I do specify in my protections that like deities and entities, like spirits of whatever type, that will ultimately be, right, like if they ask me to do something, it'll ultimately be in my highest and best, right? Like that kind of thing. That is a stipulation that I make in the broader energy when I'm putting up these protections. So like things that are good for me and my stuff, that's great. We love those. Let them in. Even if it means extra work for me, which it almost always does. I'm like, let them in, because I'm also not always tuned in, right? So that's... I'll pause there for a minute, because I know there was a question, so I'll come back to that. But yeah, that's my first pass here on our protection stuff. How are home protections and shield stuff for... Ooh. How are home protection stuff and shields for places continuously fed or stand? I generally get you. Yes. It depends what type of protection you're putting up. So that's what I mean when I'm like, my higher self is part of what keeps that outer layer going. And anytime that I'm moving around for an extended period of time, it's the same thing. And yes, it is purpley black fire. Yes. Yeah, all of that. I'm thinking about how I want to phrase this. So what I'm... the same concepts that I've talked about when I talk about tying in energy into a sigil is what you would need to tie into a protection. So you're kind of looking for as base level of an energy that's kind of like, excuse me, like we're not saying, well, I guess you could. But I'm not saying, like, take the energy of pro wrestling and tie in the energy of pro wrestling as part of your protections. You probably could, especially if you love pro wrestling, and then, like, you watch pro wrestling and you invite friends over, and then you have, like, if you're, like, watching a fight, then having your, like, tying in the conceptual energy of a pro wrestling match as your protective thing, then having that kind of energy in your house then fuels your outer protections, right? So if you want to tie it into that like concept of energy, and you do that, that's great. That actually sounds kind of sick, not gonna lie. But more like what I'm talking about usually. So if we're talking about the earth protection, right, the circle with the equal armed cross, that would literally be fed by like both the sun and the earth. I don't know why I did it this way, but it did. So both the sun and the earth. Because the earth is always receiving the sun's energy, and the sun's energy is part of what's making life on earth happen. But then the earth itself is also a thing and an entity. So that's part of why I use that one as sort of, again, like layer 2 on my space specific protections. Right, like, I don't have that symbol drawn on all of the windows in the entire house. I just had them on all the windows in my spaces where I do work. So, that kind of energy is being fed from the same places that, like, the energy of the earth is being fed from. Which, it's like, the sun, the life on Earth, and like it's that death energy as well is part of that because that's part of the energy of Earth. So like any time that like the energy of the Earth is cycling, your protections kind of become part of that. So that's how that would get fed into. You can do a protection that is fully a sun protection. You can do a solar protection. If you want to, you can do that same astrological glyph for the sun, right? The circle with just a dot in the middle, and have a solar fed protection. Keeping in mind, right, that like the sun works on this like specific day and night cycle, right? So there is still remnants of solar energy during the nighttime, but it's reflected off of the moon. It's much less. It will start to fade over time. Whereas sort of the moon itself has an energy that is different from solar energy, even though it's reflecting solar energy as well. So it's kind of like that's part of what makes the moon cool, right? It's like it's its own thing, but it's also interacting with the sun at the same time. So anytime we see it, it is its own self and a reflection of this other sun, solar self, right? Regardless, I digress. So you can have an earth-fed protection, a solar-fed protection, a like higher self-fed protection, which I guess is what I use most commonly, in addition to the earth-fed, and like the earth style. You can also have things like wind and water protections, but that's much more specific. Like, I would be much more inclined to have a water-based protection if I lived in the rainforest, right? And I don't just mean because of the rain, I also mean because of like the rivers and everything too, right? There's so much more of a living energy of water in the rainforest. That is less common in urban cities, right? And even somewhat rural cities. You're just not running into that much, you're just not running into that much living, lively water energy, right? And like, the wind is always going to be the wind. It's just not super, it's not super stable. It's not super reliable in the same way that like you don't need fire there at all times for the energy of fire to be protective. You kind of need wind to actually be there for wind to be protective, because it's like it's so variable in amplitude of energy at any given time. So that's a whole rant on the elemental stuff. I know you guys have heard me talk a ton about elemental things over all the various lives, but this is one of those cases where it's actually kind of different. Like, normally I'm like, use whatever you want. And in this case, I'm like, if it's a protection thing, I wouldn't use water as a protection unless you're in a really water-heavy and, like, spiritually alive place. I wouldn't really use wind ever for protection. Maybe for, like, a subtle offense, sure. But, like, just wind on the whole, not the most reliable for protection, right? So those are just a couple of different ways that you can have your protections fed. So I know that's sort of a long-winded answer for that, but this is, so the point being, whatever energy you could use to like tie a sigil in to like feed it over time so you don't have to re-up it all the time, same thing, protection stuff. Anyway. Saw one practice. Takes the negative energy away and turns it into abundance for yourself while keeping the icy folks away. Ooh. Take one practice that takes the negative energy and turns it into abundance for yourself while keeping the icky folks away. Nice. So yeah, that'd be transmutation then, right? And I've talked about this a little bit before. I love rocks and crystals and minerals and things. I'm not the biggest in actively using them in my spiritual stuff. I do use them, but it's just relatively uncommon. But there are tons of those that people associate with protections, right? The biggest and best, which hits on transmutation, being smoky quartz. So, just thought I'd throw that out there. Like, black tourmaline, hematite also have protection qualities. Black tourmaline just doesn't really hit for me, but like, you know, whatever. Like, I'm sure it works for other people. So just You can use crystals, you can use crystal grids, you can do all of that stuff. It's not my flavor, so I just don't dive super deep into it. But it's a completely different type of energy protection. So, again, if we're talking about layering, it's so much more complicated to me conceptually, which that's, like I said, I like to keep my protections simple but layered. So, that's just my thoughts on that. But, yeah. Yeah, wearing smoky quartz, carrying it on you, all that stuff. Yes. I have seen when I have had people make a protection grid or like a crystal grid in front of me. Their like big generator in the middle was a smoky quartz. I was like, that is some good energy. That's a good chunk. I don't know why I'm in the like gotta have the growly voice. I guess it's just so on. It's such a such a protection. You gotta have your protection in there with your rough, tough. I don't know. Regardless, smoky quartz is great. We love. We love. So I had a dream this dark thing. Shields up. Okay, so if you're needing protections in dreams, that's one of those where you have to set up, because dreams are happening in this sort of like astral space. You have to set up your protections specifically in the astral space for that to do anything. I think that now what you've asked just reminded me of where I heard that originally. I still don't remember who said it, but they were speaking specifically about dreams. Sorry, McConaughey vibes. Oh no. Okay, yes. So this whole thing of if we were going to do, I just keep using the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram as an example because I've spoken about it before and there's a lot of content about it out in the world. Like I said, I don't really use it, but I have used it. That's a whole thing that if you guys are interested, I can get deeper into on. It's just, it gets into the weird gray area of like Western magicians like using Hebrew words, and it just gets a little weird of like, are we really? But regardless, my point of bringing it up being that is essentially an astral level protection where you're like setting up your thing and you're going do 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 with your blue fire pentagram situation, and that like stays hovering in space around you, right? So that's the kind of thing I love. You're the second person this week talking about the fluorite, and I love it. I love the fluorite. Y'all know I love fluorite, but excuse me. But yeah, especially if you are having like especially recurring dreams where you're feeling like you're getting any kind of psychic spiritual stuff come at you, set up extra protections in your bedroom, right? You can still use actually, okay, ironically, this might be a case where you could use wind energy as a protection is in dream space, because dreams are so fluid and airy and like sort of they're this weird gaseous thing of like consolidating what's the word in chemistry, like particulates of stuff, right? Like condensing. So because dreams are so ephemeral in that way, that might actually be a good place to use a wind energy protection in your like overall astral, like you don't, let me clarify here too, you don't need to be in astral to set up astral level protections, right? It's just having, like I said, sort of more earth-based protections versus more ephemeral protections is basically all it really means. You're hitting different frequencies with each layer of protective stuff you're doing, and you don't need 7 layers of protection. I think I've talked about 4 or 5 total that I have, but you don't necessarily need that many. I think realistically 2 or 3 would be enough for most people. But if you're having problems with dreams and you want a thing, get on that higher, more ethereal level in a meditative state, and put in whatever your protection symbol is going to be, whether it's the earth symbol, whether it's the like You could use the alchemical wind symbol if you wanted, which I think is that just the regular upward triangle. I think, because I think the one no, air is the one with the line through it, because the regular upward triangle is fire. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Use whatever symbol you want, use whatever element you want, etc. But just make sure you place it in that sort of more floaty, more ethereal space to get it in that like astral level protection. They're all astral level, unless you're building a literal wall. It's just at what vibration, right? So I'm saying more astral versus more earthly. Smoky quartz could be working harder, yes. I'm back in the whenever I read comments for a minute, and I'm just like vibe into the lo-fi. Okay. Yeah. Oh, labradorite is actually okay. I do love labradorite for protection personally. I don't know if it'll work as well for everybody else in the same way that black tourmaline doesn't do much for me. But labradorite hits a lot of frequencies with the like. I can't fully explain it except that I've seen what presented to me as like an like sort of a guard / angel thing made out of labradorite. I don't. Does that thing still protect me? Yes. Interesting. I didn't know that was still doing anything. I don't think it like protects me personally specific. I think it's just a broader protective spirit. But yeah, like that that is more so how it, because I have a lot of labradorite and I have a lot of fluorite and I have the crystals that I have a lot of, I have more of a real spirit level connection with, so that's gonna do some level of protection for me, right? Just quick sidebar on how much I love labradorite and the fact that it is definitely a good protective one. Okay. Fluorite is one of my emotional support crystals. Me too. I'm not 100% sure where my fluorite tower is right now. I'm needing it this week. Lordy. And it's the one that makes my brain go in the straightest line. Sometimes imagine black feathers floating around me as part of my shield. Hell yes. I love that. That's sick as hell. It's also very Odin coded. No, I love that. Keep that. Make that like up that shield. Use that shield all the time. That's sick. I love that. Okay. Yeah, labradorite, like I said, it hits a lot of broader frequencies, but it's like one thing it's good at, that at least it's good at for me, again, like it's specifically psychic protection, I think, in some of the crystal books that I've seen it listed as, but to me it just works broader spectrum, but I've seen it listed for specifically psychic protection in a book or 2 or 3. I think, yeah, 2 or 3, yeah. Put a Night Watcher wall too. I realized you said Night Watchers, but my brain immediately went to Nightcrawler the X-Man. I'm just like, yes, find a new spirit friend who's willing to protect you and have them just sit on the wall like Nightcrawler, like cracking myself up. It's been a rough week. This is I wasn't sure, cause I like talking about the energy of the week because it's useful to all be able to kind of talk about it together. But I'm just like, I don't have any recommendations on this one. I spent half of my workday today just like trying to solve problems that I don't have solutions to yet. And like like instead of doing my work, because I was just like, okay, there's too much shit going on. I gotta find the solutions for these things that I don't have solutions for yet, because there's too many other things happening for me to not have this part taken care of right now. So the energy of this week is it's less aggressive than it was whatever that was last week, but it's equally funky still, I would say personally. But I suggested a lot of crying. We almost got there. There was a moment. Yeah. I just realized there was somebody on Instagram and I missed their comment and they're gone now. Oopsie, sorry. I have... There, that's going to be a better way to... I've not been having tech issues, but I am still figuring out some of the subtler stuff on how to see everything. Okay, cool. I should still keep... Okay, well, that's fine. Yeah, I hear you, Christina. That's completely fair. Yeah, this week... I agree, Lid. This week's energy is just broadly exhausting. If I had to say one thing, that would probably be it. That'd be the one. Excuse me. Okay. Let's see. What did I not talk about with protection stuff? I did say, I don't think I ever got this part out loud. I definitely thought about it, but when I was saying I might want to put another layer of protection, I've talked about how I have sort of like a plant-based shield. I kind of want to put up one of those as a more permanent protection around the house that would also be like solar fed, right? Because it's a plant. I think that'd be cool. Having, like, if you want to go real witchy with it, you can do like blackthorn or something like really thorny. But I think honestly, even just any level of like any normal plant, like any vine would probably be best, right? And like especially flowering vines like honeysuckle, which is what I use on what my shield is made of. Regardless. Mirrors. Yes, that's right, Christina. You and I were talking about this the other day. Mirrors for protection. Totally work. Totally worthwhile. It is, so mirrors have a lot of uses in spiritual stuff, and it gets kind of, people get weird about it because of that whole thing of like, mirrors are a portal to another dimension. And it's like, sure, like, if you want that. The mirror is a portal to the other dimension if you make your mirror into a portal to another dimension, my guy. Like, I get there's the... I don't know if it's specifically Irish or if it's Irish and English or if it's more than that, but I know it is like sort of more Celtic-y folklore of like, after a person dies, cover all the mirrors in your house because whatever it is, like, they're gonna get confused and get lost on their way out or something like that. That, sure, maybe, but like, in terms of your everyday, your mirrors are your mirrors, right? But you can set them up to do way more interesting shit. Like, you can set them up to do protections. You can set them up to be like scrying glasses, right? You can do all kinds of shit with mirrors, and so having you can use them offensively or defensively, and I'll leave it at that, right? Where it's just like, again, return to sender type stuff. Anything that needs to be both amplified and directed, you can use mirrors to do that. And yeah, so I know, Christina, I don't know if you want me to talk about what you told me about in your, how you've got yours set up. I don't even know if I fully understand your setup, but I get, at least conceptually, so let me know if you're cool with me talking about that, because that's cool. Started rewatching Pillow Travelers and been crying over the... Tortured myself to add on to this week. It is kind of a little bit of a self-flagellating kind of a week. It's a yeah. It's because it's like you also like as draining as everything is, you're also like I gotta feel something. Like help me feel something, man. So I hear you. Yeah. So it's a mirror tower. So like the way that and I see your question, Lid. I'll come back to that. Because I did a question session for Christina this week, and she was showing me this like literal tower mirror, like you know, cube thing, rectangular prism thing. Uh, and that was where I was like, that would be the perfect situation to put just like a big pointy smoky quartz on top would make it perfect, but it's already good as is, as just like everything that comes in gets just sent right back the fuck out. Right? And so like she was telling me this is a thing that I've had forever that I just wasn't really using for anything, and then was it your guides said set it up as a protection thing, was it? I keep speaking to you on the chat when I'm like, you're coming into me from the chat, but you're still in here. Anyway. But yeah, so that was, I thought, a really good, because like, that's one of those things where you don't necessarily need to go out and buy a mirror tower, right? But if you have one, that's an excellent application for a protective thing. Would a mirror ball work? Yeah, totally. I would, like, if we're talking about like a disco ball, right? I have. I should. One of these days, I'll show you guys how I've got some mirror stuff set up in the other room, actually, because that's cool. But that's more. It's semi astrological stuff. But if you were to use something um, like a disco ball, mirror ball type thing, in that case, just because there's so many surfaces and there's so many bits to that, I would be a little more specific with enchanting it. Just because something like a, you know, six or five sided like cube of mirrors or something, you can kind of like touch each surface and dedicate them as like this protects, and it becomes one thing. If you're gonna do a disco ball, you might want to do a more ritualistic enchanting of the whole thing. So you don't necessarily want to like rub your whole hand across it like you could. It's probably not gonna cut you. I don't know how well your disco ball is made. So yes, you can use that in protection. I would do a more specific kind of ritual, and I'm trying to think what that would look like to tell you what to do, but realistically, just like circles, like energetic circles around it, more or less. That would probably be a good thing. Where if you, I don't know what kind, like it, I don't know if there are any disco balls that have like a small hole in the middle. Like I would, if I were to use that, I would want to do something more like putting a sigil inside of it. It's just less focused. This is probably what I should have started with. This is the short version. If you're going to use something like a disco ball as your mirror protection thing, it's going to be much more ambient, much less focused, because it's so small and each little thing just goes boop, boop, boop in all a million different directions. So it's easier to define the protective properties of something that's like 4 or 6 sided. But yes, you could do it. You totally could. I say return to center here, the Elvis song. Fair, valid. I hear you, man. Well, and I probably like, because I think specifically in Hoodoo might be the one that has the specific return to sender, which I'm obviously not advocating doing the Hoodoo version. If you are not a like actual Hoodoo practitioner, right? But y'all know that. But just to say it, but yeah, there's a million versions of different return to sender type spells. So, regardless. Isn't there like a tradition of having a mirror by the foyer or by the front door to return to sender? Yeah, I think so. It's because because that's in that same category of things of like the having a broomstick behind your door and turning it upside down if you want your guests to leave, like that. All of those kinds of like in your front hall or in your foyer, kind of like those are all kind of protection things. There's, well, obviously there's also abundance ones, but a lot of those folklores, if they say anything specific about like put it in your front room, it's probably a protection thing or an abundance thing. Yeah. Before I get too far back, I do want to get back to Lid's question. Can you get vertigo because of weekly energy stuffs? I would not necessarily. It's one of those things where that's kind of a medical question ish. Like it's brain stuff, but it's like medical ish. So I'm not gonna say yeah. I could understand it. I could, especially if you're like, especially if you're particularly sensitive to the energies, Lid. More sensitive to stuff than you realize. Not to call you out, but just to call you out real quick. Potentially, maybe. Makes good enough sense to me, but I wouldn't be like, that wouldn't be my first conclusion. I would, if you're having regular vertigo, maybe ask a doctor. Right, so anyway. Disco ball string lights. Okay, cool. Yeah, you're good, Amber. It still shows you. It still shows as you. You're good. Um, what did I miss about? Oh yes, got it. Okay, so we have. I wasn't sure how much time we were gonna spend on protection stuff. I think unless anybody has any more questions about it, that's most of what I had to say. Um, so if you got questions, hit me. Otherwise, I'm just on to Babbletown now. So I am, yeah. The energy of this week, just like I don't know if today was particularly weird for anybody else. The whole week has been messy, but today was like weird for me, man. I just mm, mm. Anyway, I don't need to get too deep into it, but I guess I do have a couple random. I have random small protection things around, and when I say small, I don't even necessarily mean like physically small. I just mean like they're not dedicated. This is a protection object, right? With that stupid voice again. But at the same time, they kind of are. Like I have over there. One of my exes gave me this really interesting. I don't want to go and get it, or I would show you. But this like wooden sword that has like carved and burned in things on it. It's like sort of half Celtic, half Norse. Like I don't know whoever this artist that originally designed it, or for all I know, it could have been from Home Goods. But I do have that hanging in my bedroom, and that's kind of like a subtle-ish protection thing. Like I didn't even enchant that to be a protection thing. I think honestly, she might have enchanted it to be a protection thing. I'm not fully sure. She was a witch, so probably. Which also is that was a thing that she pulled from her garbage room, right? Her little like it was like the back of the closet. It was just us like witchy spiritual people and just having random junk that we're like, I've had this forever. Oh, this is definitely good for this, right? So I have that up there. So that's a specific protection thing for my room that I didn't even really have to do anything. It just kind of is protective. Yeah. And I have a little skull. So that is one. I don't have that many skulls. But I do have one of my little like sort of resin human skulls, right? That's I set up as a protector that I set up as a specific protecting entity for when I've talked about the house that I inherited, right, from my family. Uh, that house, I couldn't be there all the time. I didn't have the money to fix it up properly. I didn't want anybody to get into it. Like, it was a fine neighborhood, but it was just one of those things where it was like, it was pretty clear that nobody lived there, so I was like, let me just put some extra protection on this. Also, like, there were some trees that needed to get cut down. I was like, maybe this little protection thingy will just stop the trees from falling on the house until we can get them cut, and you know, all that kind of just general protection. But specifically, so it was like, yeah, little skull. I like woke it up, spoke to it. There's this whole thing. One guy who is pretty influential on the types of magic that I like. He's a weird dude, and he is gone now, which just means he's one of the ancestors, right? But his name's Peter Patton. He has multiple books. One called Visceral Magic that's really cool about, like, if anybody wants, if you don't mind reading really weird, poorly proofread, but very interesting magical texts, look up Peter Patton and look into some Ways of Modern Cunning Folk. I think is one of his books as well. He has a lot of, and again, it's more Welsh-based Celtic pagan stuff, but he's very interesting. And so he, in one of his books, describes this process of tapping the bone in ritual to, like, have I think it's specifically meant to be an ancestor spirit, but having a spirit enter into this skull that they use in ritual to awaken it, to enliven it, have a conversation, and then kind of have the spirit go away. There are a lot of traditions in witchcraft and spiritual stuff of various sorts, right? In another term you can, like, look up if you want to do a little bit more research into other types of things like this. There's a thing called a servitor. I've never made one in the fashion that I've always heard of them talked about, but essentially you are, like, creating a protection spirit, and you can, like, put it into a doll or something, but it has a set task for a set amount of time, and then once the task is done, the doll is destroyed. I don't know if that one's technically a servitor, actually. That might be a different type of, but regardless, this is all in the realm of, like, you're kind of creating a protection spirit, right? Like, in contrast to putting up a wall of protective energy, you are, like, enlivening a thing to do a protective job. So that's essentially what I did with this skull, and it's still going. Like, and I check in with it sometimes. Like, I since sold that house that I inherited. The skull is back here, and it sits near my front doorway here, as a thing to, like, face it, sort of, not necessarily at the doorway, but at least that anybody coming in would have to pass it, right? And just, if they're not supposed to be there, it's a weird vibe. Like, I don't know if this is a relatable thing or not. I've never talked about this with anybody else, I don't think. So here I am talking about it on a live. But if you ever, like, pet sitting or house sitting for someone, and you, like, need to go into a room that you don't normally go into for some weird reason, and it just, like, feels like you shouldn't be there. I don't know if that's a common experience or if that was a spiritual thing. I mean, I assume it was a spiritual thing, but, like, I pet sit for 2 different, like, family friends growing up, and if I ever had to go into a room that wasn't, like, the living room or the kitchen, because, like, the pet was hiding or whatever, it felt like I wasn't supposed to be there. That's essentially all that skull is supposed to do, just to give you the feeling, if you're actually not supposed to be there, if I didn't, like, bring you in, that you, like, know you're not supposed to be here, right? Like, it's not a I'm gonna fight you protector, it's a, like, general energetic protector. Okay, I'm so glad that other people have felt that besides just me, because I was just like, I assume it's just the house spirit, broadly speaking. What are you doing, cat? Okay, she was, like, bobbing up and down trying to, like, get around the chair leg. I'm like, you can just go here. Anyway, cat gymnastics. But yeah, so I have that skull thing set up as, again, a, like, smaller, more, I guess you would, I don't know why the thing I want to call it is more intimate protection. Like, it's like specific rooms with small things. Anyway, regardless, Oh, I feel that way with cameras. Totally fair. That's because especially with cameras, you don't really know if people are watching or not, right? That's extra weird. But anyway. Oh, people have been insane in the library this week? No. No. Library is calm place. Do not be insane in the library, please. Travel my house before I leave and ask my crystals who wants to go on a field trip. Love that. That's so fun. Oh yeah, when I say lack of proofreading on the Peter Pan books, they're not awful. It's not like every single page has a spelling error. There are if you there was like there's like four books I think, and I own at least three, if not four, of his books, and I know about like four that I think he wrote some Egyptian books too because that was a thing that he was into for a while. Anyway, doesn't matter. It's one of those like everything was very self published. Like it clearly was proofread, but it was probably like proofread by his wife like once, and then he sent it to print. Right? Like, is that kind of it's that level of proofread. So there are some mistakes. There are some repetitions between the books. So between the 3 or 4 books that I have, there's at least 2 things that I remember that were specifically repeated in multiple books. And I'm like, okay, well, there goes like 5 pages of of this book that I guess I can just skip because I already read it. So like, it's that kind of like not fully proofread. It's just not. It's not to what I would consider necessarily a professional standard, personally. But they're readable. It's not horrible. It's not horrible, but it's a little messy. I might drop the Peter Pan books in the Discord after this if I remember. Just that they're not like the most amazing books in the world, but he was a really influential guy for his time. And by for his time, I'm not talking about like the 80s, right? I'm talking about like I think he was practicing in the 80s, but he was very influential on the witchcraft community from like 2005, 6. I don't know when he started. He had a podcast too, but that's offline and you can't really listen to it anymore. Called the Crooked Path. Yeah, he was very influential, like up until he died in I think like 2015 or 2016. So very interesting dude. Lots of people loved him. Good witch. Well practiced. He did workshops on ritual possessions and stuff too, which very interesting stuff. But yeah. So just to since I started talking about him, he's a worthwhile person to know about in like this sounds funny, but like in the history of modern witchcraft, right? Like he's not a Gerald Gardner, but he's worth knowing about if you want to get into witchy shit, you know. My apologies to the house spirits I have offended by trespassing. Precisely. Yeah. Again, cameras. Part of what makes cameras weird too is the like. Cameras are more weird to me than mirrors are, and like some cameras have mirrors in them, right? Like a DSLR or something. Like a good camera will have. I guess do all cameras have like I don't know how phone cameras are built. I assume there's not a lot of mirrors, but there's glass. Yeah, whatever. Cameras are weird. Distraction cat does whatever distraction cat does. Yeah. Okay. Where did my... You guys can still see me, right? My thing says reconnecting for some reason, but I think we're fine. I don't see anything wrong. Instagram is bugged. Okay, nobody's watching the Instagram one. I'm just gonna... I don't know what's up with why Instagram is being so weird. Yeah, it fully froze. It's fine. I'm glad you guys can still see me. I'm starting to get frustrated with this Instagram thing. Instagram keeps being the problem. So, it's fine. It's not worth getting terribly bothered over. But I was actually just going to check the time and be like, did I hit an hour? I think, yeah, we're at about an hour now. So I'm going to start to wind down. I'm going to do the bibliomancy situation in a minute. Once I remember where my book is. There's my book. My book. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Instagram is as Instagram does. What are you going to do? I might... Do you guys have... Like, I know... Everybody who's on YouTube clearly doesn't mind coming to YouTube for a live. The only reason that I've been trying to keep the Instagram going is because it offers some level of discoverability in the same way that TikTok did. But TikTok being TikTok and Instagram being Instagram, yeah, I don't know. Maybe this is too inside baseball to be talking about on an app, like on the live, but I really want the Instagram thing to work, and it keeps not working, and it's annoying. It's fine. Okay. I do, yeah. I know, Instagram does, like... Instagram would be great if it was working properly. It's fine. It's like the fourth time I've said that. There was one more thing I wanted to say before I got to the book. Oh, yeah. I did put in the Discord that I've got, like, other books, and so I've got a book with more of the Taoist texts. I do... Excuse me. With it as, like, an interest of mine, right? Like, I've read some more stuff besides just the Tao Te Ching, but I haven't read a lot of, like, the official Taoist texts. And there's so many of them. Y'all, there's, like... And I say, like, official. Like, there is a collection of agreed upon, like, these are the texts that's, like, over 1,000 volumes of stuff. Taoism is not a one and done book kind of a religion, and it's, or spirituality or whatever. It's a religion. So I'm just very excited about having more stuff. Like, I love this book. This book is great. And there is obviously, like, the text of a different translation of the Tao Te Ching in that new book that I have. But it's got more of the other stuff, and I'm excited to read more of the other stuff. So I'm very excited about that. And I know I already shared in the Discord, but I just want to talk about that for a second, because I'm like, yes! Because not, like, you know, like, these over 1,000 texts have not been all translated, right? So there's only so many that we have, and also I'm not going out of my way to buy, like, $40 worth of, like, ancient transcribed texts, right? But this was, like, in a used bookstore, and I was like, there's, like, 4 of them in here. Yes! So I got very excited. Okay. Yeah. We'd be bibliomancying for days, just finding the one. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And welcome back, Kit Kat. Just in time for bibliomancy. Okay. So yes, everybody, I'm gonna do this. Give your general energetic affirmation that you want to be part of the bibliomancifying. I'm going to take a sip of water real quick while y'all do that, because I know that the stream gets a few seconds delayed. Just felt something changed, so somebody said yes. Okay. And honestly, for the rest of the week, just for like the next 2 days would be great. Like, just get us through tomorrow and into the weekend. Okay. All right. Yeah. Passage 70 here. So even the first line immediately made me laugh, given that it's this book. Okay. My words are very easy to understand, very easy to practice. No one under heaven can understand them. No one can practice them. Words have ancestors, deeds have masters. If people don't understand this, they don't understand me. Few understand me, and this is my value. Therefore the sage wears rough clothing and carries jade inside. I know I've read that one on live before. I love that one. It's actually so good. Just my words are very easy to practice, very easy to understand, very easy to practice. No one under heaven can understand them. No one can practice them. Words have ancestors. Deeds have masters. If people don't understand this, they don't understand me. Few understand me, and this is my value. Therefore the sage wears rough clothing and carries jade inside. I love it. I love this one. Okay. We need to start keeping a tally of it. Yeah, we could do that. Yeah. Just everything about this one is so good. It's so funny too. And like you say heart power, and like that would like I don't know. This is conflating systems, right? I've talked plenty of times about how frustrated I am about the 7 chakra system and the colors. Like it's not that it's invalid. It's just, but having like heart power, jade inside, green heart chakra. It's just good. It's just good. It's just good. I like it. This is number 70. Yes, number 70. The sage wears rough clothing, your hair's jade inside, lives in my brain. Good. Yes. It's just, it's. I wonder, I thought that you said it just before it actually started, but that's like, I was still just like, it's funny you say it because it's, so. Just, yes. Okay. Obviously, I get excited about this. I love this book. Okay. With that, we will call that the live for tonight. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. Thanks for chatting. Thanks for being here, doing the things you do. Yeah, I love having this little community to talk to and do readings for and just do everything. So, yeah, thanks for spending your time with me. Appreciate it. And I will see you guys all next week, right? See ya.